This is a picture of the old Sperry Mill plant in South Vallejo. It's been closed since 2004, but is now the center of a significant controversy. A company called Orsem and another called the Vallejo Marine Terminal wish to construct a deep water port facility and a cement finishing plant on the site of the Sperry Mill. With me today is Mr. Peter Brooks, president of Fresh Air Vallejo. Peter, is Orchem bringing a green product to this community?
Orchem is not green. Orchem is dangerous and Orchem is unhealthy. The emissions that come from the facility will make people in South Vallejo sick and will make people who are already sick even sicker.
Very good. How do you know this?
Well, there's something called an environmental impact report. Now, I do want to say that when Orchem first came to town a few years ago, they promised a lot of jobs, and they promised that Vallejo would be at the center of a new green economy. But when the environmental impact report came out in September, when groups like my group, Fresh Air Vallejo, got together to read it, it only took us a few hours to start to find the terrible truth about having a cement factory right next to an urban environment.
What are the issues that you see?
The main issue is the amount of pollution, air pollution, primarily something called nitrogen oxide, or NOx. We estimate, the environmental impact report estimates that about 70 tons per year of NOx will come from the facility. Now, it's important to remember that these are emissions that cannot be mitigated. There's plenty of air pollution and plenty of fugitive dust that Orsem can maintain, but the environmental impact report states that we can expect about 70 tons to be released over the community. Now, that would be a combination of Orchem's facility and the Vallejo Marine Terminal.
Any other sources of pollution that you see in that picture?
Well, that's a very important point, Robert. Orsem's facility itself is not the main emitter of these pollutions. It's the trucks, and it's the ships, and it's the trains that service the facility that are emitting almost 70 tons per year.
Most of us have heard about the number of trucks, and the number seems to vary from time to time. But how would they impact South Vallejo and the other areas in terms of their movement?
Well, to answer that question, it's important to realize where this facility is located. Some people think by mistake that it's on Mare Island. It's not. The proposed facility is actually out at the old Sperry Mill or the General Mill. This is something that it's in South Vallejo. It's at the end of Lemon Street. When you take the ferry, you can see the ferry. It's the tall white buildings that are right on the waterfront. Now, the location is why there's so many problems with this proposal. Lemon Street is the only street that connects to the facility. So about 300 trucks a day will need to travel on Lemon Street, which is a residential street. About 300 trucks a day will need to travel on Lemon Street to use the facility. These trucks are big trucks. They're not small cement trucks. They're 18-wheel diesel trucks, and the traffic will peak around 3 a.m. So what concerns us is the neighborhood itself. Obviously, it has homes, and it has children, it has a school, it has churches, it has a playground. Grace Patterson Elementary School is not on Lemon Street, but it is about 684 yards away from Orchem. That's just too close.
Yes. What is NOx? Why is that important?
It's nitrogen oxides. NOx is the shorter way to say it. These are harmful emissions that come from diesel fumes and diesel soot. So the problem with NOx, especially in South Vallejo, is that it causes asthma. South Vallejo already suffers from a very high rate of asthma, perhaps the highest in the county, and by some estimates, twice the California average. So when you have 300 trucks a day driving through a community, past people's homes and schools, you have a situation where people who may already be sick with asthma are now dealing with something to make it even worse.
I see. Now, the folks from Orsem are saying that there's a substantially fewer number of trucks. They're saying 170 or something like that a day. How does that rationale work with yours?
Well, it's it's important to remember that these trucks have to go both ways. Where Orcam may say it's only 150 trucks, it's only 159 trucks, let's remember they go into the facility, fill up with cement, and then leave the facility.
Let's go back to the area of pollution, okay? I've seen numbers from Orson that say their smokestack is going to have just a small amount of pollution and this and that. Is there any other factors that we have to look at in this?
Again,
spectrum?
this is the problem that all Vallejoans should have with Orson. They're playing a little bit loose with the facts. It's true that their smokestack does not produce as much pollution as a regular cement factory. However, the danger at the facility is not just the smokestack. It's the ships that will be idling with their engines running for 6 days at a time. It's the 300 trucks a day that'll be using the facility. It's the exhaust from the various pieces of loading equipment that'll be running on the facility back and forth 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Orsum's facility does not produce as much pollution as a regular cement factory, but Orsum's facility is still part of a 70 tons a year of particulate matter, dust, and NOx escaping over South Vallejo.
Let's talk a little bit about the relationship between Orsim and its product and the kids in the school. I want to revisit that issue.
Nowhere else have we found in our research has Orcam built a cement factory this close to a school. Grace Patterson School is only 684 yards away from Orcam. Now, we're concerned not only because of the air pollution, but we're concerned that nearly half of these trucks will drive by Grace Patterson School during the day. So it's a combination of trucks on the road and air pollution that should concern people the most about Grace Patterson School. And there's something else very important to remember, and that is kids have a right to ride their bikes in front of their house. Kids have a right to walk with their auntie to the playground after school. Kids have a right to jump rope in front of their house. How are these kids going to do this with 300 trucks a day driving by? It takes away the right for kids to be kids.
You know, speaking of that, and in terms of the larger community issue here, how have the community representatives and the people that help make the decisions for the future of Vallejo, how have they been treated in this whole matter?
By now, our city council members have read the environmental impact report. By now, they know that there are a certain level of pollutants in the air. By now, they know that the traffic is going to be a problem. It's hard for us to understand how people who are elected to protect us could possibly vote in favor of this toxic monster on the waterfront.
Peter, in the larger context of this, what are the decision makers doing? Is this a done deal?
It is not a done deal. Just a little quick background. The draft environmental impact report came out right after Labor Day. Now, there was a period of 45 days that was extended to 60 days because of the complexity of the report. It's over 1,000 pages long. And there was a period of time where citizens could send in questions and comments and concerns about the draft environmental impact report. These questions range from simple things like, what about the wildlife, to more technical questions, or questions that actually put into question the validity of the environmental impact report. For example, where they would say on page 10 that it's something, and then on page 240 they would say that it's something else. So now the draft environmental impact report is going through a process to create a final environmental impact report. That final impact report will be coming out soon, and then the City Council will vote on it. Before the City Council, the Planning Commission votes, and then the City Council will vote on whether or not this project should move ahead.
Okay, tell me, what is the general plan working group then in this context? What is its function?
Now, I am not part of the General Plan Working Group, but I do know that there are citizens that are involved in local government, citizens that volunteer their time and that are tasked with creating a better Vallejo.
How are the citizens of Vallejo being treated in this by the various parties involved?
Well, you know, I often joke that you meet the nicest people when a cement factory threatens to come to town. You know, people call us NIMBYs, which stands for Not in My Backyard. We have people from all over Vallejo that are getting together to read the environmental impact report, to create flyers, to fill our community forums with discussion. We've had 1,500 flyers passed out door to door in South Vallejo. We're not NIMBYs, we're Vallejoans.
How are citizens getting involved in this?
Well, look how far we've come. In September of this year, a 1,000-page environmental impact report was dropped on the citizens without much fanfare. People came together, including my group, Fresh Air Vallejo, to form a reading group. And when we read this, we realized there was a lot of bad news in these pages. And, you know, we demanded and received no fewer than 3 public meetings. We've gone door to door in South Vallejo. That's ground zero for Orcam's dust and soot. We've handed out over 1,500 flyers and to reassure our neighbors that their voices matter. We are school teachers responsible for the future of our children who will be teaching just a few hundred yards away from Orcam smokestack. We are church leaders whose sanctuaries will be disrupted by 300 trucks a day. We are homeowners unable to enjoy our homes or even sell our homes with a cement factory as a neighbor. We are small business owners, frustrated that the streets and sidewalks in front of our stores need repair, but our city is required to fix the road damage caused by trucks belonging to an overseas corporation. Look how far we've come. More than 500 citizens took the time to read the environmental impact report and send their questions and concerns to this city. And, Robert, we are not alone. We're joined by the Sierra Club, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, Baykeeper, the Trust for Public Lands, Bay Trails, and more, a growing number of organizations concerned about a cement factory that will take far, far more than it gives to a city desperately trying to recapture its glory.
You know, in a related case, the General Plan Working Group has been working for the previous 2 years to come up with a plan for the future of Vallejo. And apparently they narrowed that choice down to 3 different scenarios. And they then, as a group, after 2 years and all these consultant work, they took one scenario and made it their primary scenario. And Mr. Nathan Stout, a member of that group, recently interviewed with What's Happening in Vallejo, and he had this to say.
That process went forward to draft scenarios. Now, with the draft scenarios, there were 3 different draft scenarios. There was the urban villages, there was the new town center, and there was the river and bay city. Now, those went through public process too, where the public could comment on each draft scenario, help contribute to it, refine it, and then they brought it back to us, the working group. We could make changes to it, and then we had a meeting. We had actually, before our meeting, there was a meeting with the public. There were a series of workshops where they could comment on the 3 scenarios, draw from each scenario, and create the preferred scenario. Now, the consultants took the information that they received from the workshops, there were more than one, there were 3 or 4, and they took the information that they received at the workshops and then they created the preferred scenario. They brought it back to us, the General Plan Working Group, and at this point, because it was such an important decision, they didn't just bring it back to us. The Economic Vitality Commission was there, the General Plan Working Group, and the Planning Commission. Now, a lot of us had been at those workshops earlier with the public, and we knew that certain changes still needed to be made to that final document. And on November 23rd, when the consultants brought the preferred scenario back to us, we made certain changes to the document. One, for example, was that we wanted a promenade all along our waterfront. We wanted the public to have as much access to the waterfront as possible. This was something we heard over and over again in the workshops, and we wanted to make sure it was accurately represented. So that was one of the changes we made that night on November 23rd. So staff had pulled me aside and they basically said that we can't put forward to council what you voted on. We're going to have to make changes to the document, the preferred scenario. Now, so I wrote my email to city staff asking them to postpone the vote of the preferred scenario until after the Orsum VMT vote, because I thought there was a conflict of interest. Then a couple days later, this is probably November 30th, somewhere around there, staff comes back and they say they're going to have another meeting on December 14th where, we would have to revisit our vote, where we would have to reconsider. And that was the December 14th meeting. We had originally had something scheduled different to happen. The original preferred scenario has to go before council to get council's approval to become the accepted preferred scenario. So city staff wants to present their own preferred scenario. They want to have a map that shows the waterfront with the Kiewit site and the Orsum site in gray hash marks so that planning will happen around those sites, but it won't happen for those sites because they're pending projects. The General Plan Working Group and the Economic Vitality Commission, well, at this point, it's the General Plan Working Group, will also be presenting their own preferred scenario to City Council. So you have two possible outcomes. Well, you have a myriad of outcomes because City Council can change it however they want to. But you have two recommendations going before Council. Now, the interesting thing is that these two recommendations, they've been in the works for a long time. And one of them has involved public process, the general plan with the preferred scenario voted on November 23rd. That has involved public process, and that started in January or February of 2014. And that's been with the 30-odd workshops, the meetings, all of that. The second recommendation represents something that has been happening behind the scenes that me, as a working group member, I wasn't aware of. And I don't think the public was aware of it either. And that has to do with the Mare Island Straits Economic Development Committee and things like that. So you have these two recommendations, and the history of each recommendation should influence what happens from here on out, because you have a respected public process, and then you also have this process that the public wasn't aware of, could not participate in, there was no transparency. So what's going to happen? These two preferred scenarios are going to go before council, and council gets to vote on them. I don't know when that'll happen. It'll probably be, let's see, it's January now. It'll probably be February or March sometime, from what I hear. Probably February, but I'm not sure.
What's Happening Vallejo recently contacted the city attorney's office in Vallejo to confirm or deny this particular allegation from Mr. Stout. At this taping, the city attorney's office has not returned our call. Now, Peter, tell me, this is a bleak story you're telling us. What's in it for Vallejo? What is the economic development?
Vallejo isn't getting enough from this deal. The tax revenue is only about $360,000 a year. There isn't a lot more money to be had out of this project. So it is a sweetheart deal for this company from Ireland, where most of their profits will go back. So it's not enough money, it's not enough jobs, and it's too much pollution.
Peter, tell me, what is the Mare Island Strait Economic Development Committee?
A short time ago, a citizen's routine request for public documents uncovered that 3 of our city council members, and on at least one occasion our mayor, have been meeting with Orcam in secret to discuss dredging the Mare Island Strait. The problem with this is these 3 city council members will have to vote on Orcam. The project has not been approved. So when people are meeting in secret with an applicant, when they're having lunch with the applicant, or when they're taking bus tours with the applicant.
Now, what's wrong with that?
Well, when you have an applicant like Orcam who hasn't been approved, and they're meeting in secret with 3 of our city council members, you run into a situation where those council members could be biased. And you also run into a situation where the public, where the citizens are now worried that they're not going to get an honest and fair city council vote. Councilmember Pippin Dew apologized for her involvement in the committee. The city attorney also called for a special meeting, something called a cure, that would air any type of allegations that improprieties have been made. At that meeting, there's 3 council members who were involved with MISDEC. That would be Jess Melgapo, Pippin Dew, and Raz Verda Aliga. They didn't apologize for being part of this this committee, perhaps because they didn't need to apologize. But they still should make some type of statement to the citizens about whether or not they may have been biased with these secret meetings.
I see. Let's talk about jobs. Orcam is saying that they've got plenty of jobs available.
Vallejo needs jobs, but Orcam is only bringing about 20 or 30 jobs to Vallejo. Now, when you look at their application in Orcam President Steve Bryan's own handwriting, you see that it clearly says 20 to 30 jobs. The Vallejo Marine Terminal will probably bring about the same number of jobs. But the job number that Orcam is now using, 189 jobs, that includes a theoretical increase in jobs. For example, Orcam is saying, well, we'll have so many trucks there that there'll need to be more people at the filling stations. Or there'll be so many workers there that we'll need to add more waitresses at the diners. But what Orcam isn't saying is, will we also be adding more respiratory therapists or more emergency room people because of the pollution that the facility is causing? Orcam is bringing 20 to 30 jobs. There's no guarantee that those jobs will go to people in Vallejo. Orcam has said before that they prefer candidates with cement industry experience. There's also something else very important to remember. I am pro-business and I'm also pro-union. However, Orcam's parent company, they're called Ecosem in Europe, locked out the union for over 10 years. They fought the union for over 10 years to keep the union workers from unloading their ships. Ecosem lost that battle, but I do think that's important for us to remember that Orcam may come in as a union shop, but there's no guarantees that they'll continue to be a union shop.
I see. Now, Orcam is also claiming that they're a green company, that they have a green product. How does that work for you?
Orcam is greener than a typical or a regular cement factory. Cement factories are huge polluters. These are traditional cement factories. Some people call them Portland cement factories. It's important to remember that while Orcam produces a lot less pollution than a Portland cement factory, it still is a polluter, and as we've discussed, up to 70 tons of NOx per year. Orcam is not replacing a cement factory, so their claims that they are the benefits, the green benefits, well, if they were replacing another cement factory with theirs, but that's not really the case. And there's something else that's very, very important. Orcam is not obligated to only make its green cement. It clearly states in the draft environmental impact report that if market conditions change, Orcam can switch over to Portland cement. So now what do we have? We have a so-called green cement facility on our waterfront. Then the economy takes a dip. Or Orcam misjudged the demand for its Louis Vuitton of cement. Now we have a facility that's either closed or a facility that, because of market demands, has switched over to the grossly polluting Portland cement.
In 30 seconds, what's environmental justice?
The Environmental Protection Agency states that you have equality when it comes to industry coming to your neighborhood. If you are already suffering from the effects of heavy industry, as the people in South Vallejo are, it's unfair to heap more pollution on top of you. You don't just measure the output from Orcam and VMT. You measure what's already there in that community. It's a cumulative measurement. Environmental justice is put in place to make sure, primarily, that minority neighborhoods don't suffer an undue burden of industry.
Peter Brooks, thank you for being on our show.
Thank you.
It's
Enjoyed
been a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching What's Happening Vallejo. My name is Robert Rothbury.